Welcome to another edition of Wrestling Roundtable Radio here on blogtalkradio.com. We got another panel set to talk about some current events going on, except last week we were kind of playing catch-up with WrestleMania, the big show that happened in March. This week we're playing catch-up with mixed martial arts, but we will talk a little wrestling. And introducing our panel here today, we have Jay Leto joining us once again. Hello, Jay.
What's up, Eric? How you doing, man?
It was a real shitty day, but that's another story. You were getting an earful of my ticket problems today.
Yeah,
driving in Philadelphia, not too fun anymore. Anyway, also joining us again, Sal Rendazzo. Hello, Sal.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Will Vafides comes to us straight out of the Izod Center last night. How you doing, Will?
Doing great. Obviously went to another great show last night, which we'll talk about, I'm sure. But, yep, I'm feeling fresh, feeling good. Let's talk.
You're feeling fresh?
Feeling fresh, man. The term that a lot of kids use these days is the term fresh.
Oh, that sort of fresh. Got it. So last week, one of the founding fathers of the Wrestling Roundtable returned after a long absence, Lawrence Haber. Now we have the other founding father, along with myself. Rodney LeConte joins us for the first time on Wrestling Roundtable Radio. Hello, Rod.
Hey, yo, it's good to be here. And, Will, I saw about 5 minutes of last night's show. I wanted to hear what you thought was great.
And like it was advertised, we want to catch up on some of the latest mixed martial arts events. But before that, it was a very eventful few days in the world of pro wrestling as well. TNA presented the Lockdown pay-per-view in St. Louis, and usually one of their bigger shows of the year. Last year it was pretty good. We attended it in Philadelphia. And this time I checked out a couple of the matches. The Mr. Anderson match was pretty fucking right. It was pretty fucking good. And how often do you hear those two words in the same sentence? Of course, it was against Kurt Angle. Needless to say, it was probably going to be excellent. And this one truly was. And not to take anything away from Mr. Anderson, he definitely held up his end of the deal. But it was a really, really good match. Although I think some people are really overblowing it by saying it was just as emotional as the Michaels-Undertaker match at WrestleMania. Really, I don't think I'd go that far. But it was still very good. And Pope, I believe if this was his litmus test for main event slot in TNA, I think he did pretty decently. I thought the match with AJ Styles was rather good. And unfortunately, it seems as if he's going to be forgotten due to the events that happened the next day on Impact, as Rob Van Dam surprised everybody and won the TNA World title against AJ Styles in the main event. And it seems as if Pope has slid back down to have a semi-main event or mid-card feud with Mr. Anderson. I was kind of hoping for a potential three-way with AJ Styles and Van Dam for the title maybe in the main event of the pay-per-view. But I'm going to throw it to you guys. What do you think of this move, Jay? Some people are comparing it to Goldberg beating Hogan on free TV in terms of stupidity, but I wouldn't go that far, would you?
No, it's not. It's not the same at all. I feel that what TNA did is they tried to literally fire a shot at WWE last night because, as we all saw, exactly, it was WWE SmackDown last night, and TNA had an opportunity to really make something happen because a lot of people were aware of the fact that the big Raw stars weren't going to be on the show. I thought it was a good move. I mean, you get the belt on Rob Van Dam, who, believe it or not, is a way more well-known star than AJ Styles is right now, and I think it's a good idea. I think as long as they keep the feud going, it'll have some good matches, and it could be a long pay-per-view feud.
Well, so far the ratings have come in. TNA is crawling back up to a 1.0, and Raw is continuing to drop slowly down to a 3.0. Do you think this is an indication that they're on the right path, Sal?
Well, it's hard to say. I kind of followed TNA off and on. I was definitely surprised with the Rob Van Dam title win, but I don't know. I feel like they got this new thing going with AJ and Flair. I kind of saw him having a longer reign, and while I'm all for a guy like Rob Van Dam, it seems like besides trying to fire a shot at WWE on what was perceived that they would have an off night, maybe it's just one of those things where Hogan comes in and he says, I don't really see a lot in this guy AJ. Let's put the belt on Van Dam and see what he can do.
Who would think that taking that one-shot deal as a guest trainer at Celebrity Championship Wrestling would pay off so well for Rob Van Dam?
No kidding.
Rodney LeConte!
Well, what I thought of the whole Rob Van Dam thing was I started actually watching TNA around a little after the second hour, And when they announced RVD versus AJ Styles, it didn't hit me till a few seconds later that this is actually one of my dream matches I really wanted to see. So I'm thinking, like, holy shit, these guys are going to fight. And then when RVD won clean, I was like, this could be for the belt. And I realized, I was like, wow. Now it's like, oh, yeah, tomorrow's 420.
Right.
But nonetheless, I thought it was a good move. I think that they really showed that they're not going to waste time like ECW and WWF did to put the belt on Rob Van Dam. I think that's the ultimate statement right there.
I think it also goes to show that they don't have that much emphasis, long-term anyway, on pay-per-view. We've known that Dixie Carter's made it plainly clear that they would love to reduce the amount of pay-per-views they do because they don't make a lot of money, if any, from it. They probably don't at all. If they didn't have contracts to pay-per-view companies, they would be doing that already. And they do have plans in the future to reduce the number, I believe, to about 6 or 8 pay-per-views a year and would like to concentrate more on 3-hour specials on Spike. So people saying that they blew a potential pay-per-view payday by building up AJ versus Rob Van Dam, yeah, much like Goldberg Hogan, they're right in that sense. But on the other hand, this could go forward in perpetuating the idea, especially with Samoa Joe coming back as well, that you need to be watching on Monday nights, and maybe this is the kind of thing they need to do long-term to build this Monday night audience. What do you think, Will?
The Pope's push is officially done because when you have him lose with all that build-up and Rob Van Dam just comes out of nowhere, wins the belt, that just killed the Pope's momentum after having a good, solid feud. So to me, that was a mistake because now the Pope's push is done completely. Was it good for Rob Van Dam? Yeah, it was good that he won it, you know. But again, to me, it just, again, they capitalized on a situation that was perfect for them because that's a way to get people to watch their show over watching Raw. Because that was kind of a shock. I didn't know I was at Raw. So, or SmackDown, whatever you want to call it. It's good, but again, they're pushing I mean, they've done this before. Christian, Rhino all got the belt a month before they got into the company. Angle did it, you know, so it's been done before. I'm not surprised by it, honestly.
All right. Well, you attended Monday Night SmackDown, as it were, or whatever it was called, last night in Izod. How'd you feel about the show? You seemed like you had a lot of fun.
It was a great show. I mean, I got these tickets long in advance from my girlfriend. She got me the tickets. You know, again, we were a little I was disappointed by the fact that, yeah, Raw guys were, you know, we're not going to be there. That's what we paid for. You know, that's what we're supposed to get. But giving credit to WWE on a situation that was, like, really stuck, they did a great job. The promo with CM Punk in the beginning was phenomenal. Great promo by Triple H and CM Punk. Wrestling-wise, Swagger Undertaker was great. Six-Man Tag was great. I think overall a lot of people enjoyed it. And for some fans who didn't know, we actually have the opportunity to get a refund on that show if we really want to, because we have to go to the box office. So we can actually get a refund if we really choose to. So that's interesting enough that we get to go to the show, enjoy it, and then even get a refund after it. So,
if only they offered that weekly. Bill,
yes,
who wrote the recap for our website, didn't exactly have a glowing review, and I doubt ever used the word great in his to describe the show. What do you think, Jay?
I saw a little bit of the show. I didn't watch it all the way through. I missed a little bit in the middle. I think I missed the Drew McIntyre match. I think he wrestled Matt Hardy. I didn't see that, but I saw everything else, and I liked CM Punk. He was really good. Having him on Raw is always a plus. Triple H was the only big Raw star really on the show. And the MacGruber stuff was corny. I don't know what they were really trying to accomplish with bringing back Great Khali for something stupid like that. And the six-man was okay. I mean, they threw Edge out there. They literally gave the Izod Center as much star power as they possibly could for the circumstances. They had to hype the pay-per-view too, so they were throwing a lot of video packages in and those via satellite promos. So they did an okay job of hyping up Extreme Rules. It's a shame that the Raw guys couldn't be there to actually further their feuds, but either way, they did an okay job last night.
I saw most of the show, and I was, pleasantly surprised. They really tried to make the best of a bad situation. They gave away what to me, it was a great match, and Undertaker versus Swagger, first time ever for free. I mean, how can you complain about that? It was a pretty good match too.
Most people were complaining about the finish.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
I could see that.
We always compare Jack Swagger to Brock Lesnar, and there's no way that in 2002 Brock Lesnar would have lost to The Rock one week and then Undertaker the next when they're trying to build him up as the new champion. It's pretty much the complete opposite this time around with the blonde amateur wrestler winning the title. He lost to Orton last week, I believe, and now Undertaker this week. And I believe it was you, Will, who said at least he looks strong in the match, though.
Yeah, you realize that Swagger actually, when he gets time to wrestle, he puts on 3-star matches, like 3 out of 5-star matches. He does a great job. So to me, he can put on a match if he was really given the chance. Now, not letting him win, that's a problem. I think it would have been better if he just got counted out, because then at least it makes him look like a coward, and that's better for him. But to lose cleanly, that doesn't help. It doesn't help the World Championship. That was the only problem I had with that match, was the finish. If
I'm
he just
sure they know that.
Well, I don't even think it would make him look like a coward necessarily. I think that probably would have been the best move, because you figure being afraid of the Undertaker, that's not something that's going to make you look, I mean, technically, I guess most people would be afraid of the Undertaker, and especially if you have a title match coming up, this coming weekend. So that probably would have been a much better move, I think.
Rod?
Well, Eric, I was actually offered to go to Raw free, and I passed up this opportunity, something I wouldn't have done years ago. Not if Brock Lesnar was the champion.
Right.
Because, Raw hasn't really intrigued me. There's been very few things that on Raw that I've really been interested in.
Plus,
and knowing that
spent half the time in the building watching the screen.
Exactly. And just hearing about, Swagger and Undertaker, it seems like they're giving Jack Swagger the Rey Mysterio title run. This guy who everyone wanted to see win the title, and this guy won it on a SmackDown. At least Rey Mysterio won it on the WrestleMania.
Someone described it to me as Jericho in 2002.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, for a guy who's, finally, after all these ridiculous things that they're putting him, and has finally won the title, you think they'd make him a strong champion, but they're just really in the fact that this guy doesn't deserve to hold the belt and he has it too soon. And I just think it's pretty silly. And what I saw from Raw, first of all, I don't know who McGruber was. I never really saw him. And the few minutes I saw, it was stuff with him and Khali, and I switched to the NBA playoffs.
Well, we're going to switch to mixed martial arts because last month was a huge weekend, the first time that WrestleMania and UFC were back-to-back. And Saturday, March 27th, had UFC 111 at the Prudential Center. I don't know how you guys did not make sure you were there, because if I was in New Jersey instead of Phoenix, there's no way I wouldn't have been in the building. And the big fights, of course, were George St-Pierre defending the welterweight title against Dan Hardy, which we will get to in a moment. But up first, to crown the interim heavyweight champion, Frank Mir and Shane Carwin. We're going to go into more detail about UFC's heavyweight division when we tape 2 new episodes of Wrestling Roundtable on Sunday. That episode will be uploaded in another week and a half or so. So we'll probably go into more detail about them then, but I'm going to throw it to you guys. What are your quick thoughts on Mir and Carwin's interim heavyweight title fight?
I think Frank Mir is an absolute bitch. I really hate Frank Mir. He should have been focused on Shane Carwin.
Absolute bitch, really. Wow, I don't think Congo Era would say that.
Hey, whatever. It's okay. He just did not focus on Shane Carwin. If he was still talking about Brock Lesnar before this fight with Carwin even happened, his focus was in the wrong spot.
Didn't have terroristic threats responded to in a legal manner.
Exactly. Shane Carwin was impressive. He really got the job done, I thought.
Yeah, Carwin, man, Mir, I got to say, Mir looked really big compared to last year. He's a big dude now.
He weighed in at 265 the day before.
He has to, because look at the competition. Look at Carwin. Look at Lesnar. These are guys. These big guys are now coming in. You can even say Lashley's now a big guy. These are big guys fighting. And the fact now is that Shane Carwin comes in and kicks him out. And there you go. Carwin's now the interim champion. Him and Brock are going to fight just like it was supposed to be. I didn't think Mir even deserved a shot, so personally, I'm happy that Shane Carwin won. I predicted he'd win. And we're going to see a good fight, hopefully in July.
Yeah, Carwin won, and it was decisive, too. I mean,
to say the least.
Yeah, so it's really, I was happy to see that. Frank Mir's not one of my favorites. I think, both of his fights against Brock, even the fight that he won, he was he was taking a beating for most of that fight even. So I was really happy to see Carwin get the win, if for no other reason, just to see a new fight for Brock.
Well, I was never a Frank Mir hater. I always thought he was a good mixed martial artist. I think first time I saw was when he beat Tank, and I knew that this guy had great submission skills for a guy his size. But I think it didn't matter whether he was focused on Brock. He could have been focused on Carwin for years. I think it would have, resulted in the same knockout. He was really in love with his stand-up, and Shane Carwin was just really too much for me. I mean, you can't really humble and try to clinch with a wrestler the size of Carwin with the skill. I mean, he should have really known that with Lesnar. He should try to take him to the ground, and I think that's where he made his mistake. Carwin made him pay, and we'll see where Frank Mir goes from here. I mean, I think some people wanted to see the big money fight with Frank Mir and Brock because that would have been absolutely huge.
It would have been the rubber match, and that really got into people's consciousness after Mir had that comeback fight against Congo.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think this is good, too, because now you have an up-and-comer, winning the interim belt and getting the title shot that people always knew that he'd someday get. And now we have a November card happening in July, so it's going to be a very interesting match, to say the least.
Carwin scared the shit out of me as a Lesnar fan because not only was he scary as a prospect to fight Lesnar in their originally scheduled fight in November, because his last several fights have been a total of about 2 minutes added together, all first-round knockouts. Not only did he beat Mir and beat him badly, Lesnar did do the same, you could say, in July, but Carwin did it faster. And I'll save more of my thoughts on Shane Carwin for our discussion of UFC heavyweights, but moving on to welterweights. In the main event, George St-Pierre dominated Dan Hardy. And in the story written by Steve Feitel in the Asbury Park Press afterwards, both actually, Carwin and St-Pierre, talked about how they weren't even satisfied with their victories. Apparently, they thought it wasn't thorough enough, which as a viewer, I couldn't disagree more, but St-Pierre was disappointed that he couldn't put Hardy away, couldn't finish him. And I've heard some criticism about George St-Pierre in that he didn't really test himself in this fight. He didn't stand with Hardy because that's Hardy's strong suit, and he's playing it safe, and that's how he gets through these fights. What's your impression of that, Jay?
I'm not really a George St-Pierre fan. I was always a fan of Matt Hughes. He really got me into the UFC, so I naturally don't like George St-Pierre, but you said it, man. He was dominant, and he's been dominant. Nobody's really stood a chance against him, and God knows how long, I can't even remember. I don't know who's going to stand a chance against him at this point. It could come to the time where he's got to move up in a weight class or something because he's just been so dominant. We'll see what happens with George St-Pierre. I can't even tell you what's next for him. I have no idea what could be next for him at this point.
Next for us is Will. What do you think of GSP's victory, Will?
I love my French-Canadian, man. He dominated Hardy, and I expected it. I didn't think Hardy was going to beat St-Pierre. To me, it was like the Frank Mir-Carwin fight was more of an event to me than Pierre than Hardy because I knew Pierre was going to beat him. Mir-Carwin could have been like a toss-up a little bit more, but yeah, St-Pierre grounded him all the time. Hardy couldn't get out. It was just all ground game for Pierre. And, again, he doesn't have to stand up. Why would he risk himself getting knocked out? He's doing what he's supposed to do as a fighter. He knows the weakness of the other opponent, and he takes advantage of it. That's what he did. That's what any other fighter would have done. He's not taking it easy. He's doing what he knows what to do. So that's just my opinion on those people who say that he's playing it safe.
Yeah, I mean, how could you get on him for playing it safe? You know, this guy is I believe he's a jiu-jitsu black belt. He's a hell of a wrestler. He's going to do what works for him. And clearly, I mean, it was a unanimous decision, but one of the scorecards had it 50-43. You know, I mean, to talk about dominant. I could see how a perfectionist like St-Pierre might not be happy with his performance, but you know, you're not going to finish everybody. And he's just at his age. I mean, I think he's probably the youngest of all the champions right now, and just he's going to be around for a long time, and he's gonna beat a lot more people.
GSP is my man. He's my guy. That's my favorite fighter, and everyone pretty much knew he was going to win. But Primetime, I think, did a very good job of making people realize that there is a chance that Dan Hardy could Matt Serra GSP. And
I think the whole point of Primetime was to sell the prospect of Dan Hardy because, like Will was saying, I don't think many people going into this thought he had a chance. No, but yeah, Primetime did a very good job of building Hardy up as a credible contender for the belt. And that Matt Serra win, like, over GSP is still in the minds of GSP fans and MMA fans, knowing that, like, that at a certain point can still happen again. That was like being sexually abused as a child for an MMA fan. I just put it in the back of my mind and try and forget it ever happened.
Exactly. I remember when Hooters cheering and Machine was stunned. But anyway, yeah, I mean, GSP, he played it smart. I mean, why play to someone else's strengths? Frank Mir, especially after watching what Frank Mir did, why GSP risked the same thing? He's too smart of a fighter. He had Hardy in a lot of dominant positions, so I don't see how people can really, not give him the credit he deserves.
Much like the Thiago Alves fight at 100, the story was the same. St-Pierre took him down at will and dominated him, as it showed on the scorecards. I agree with you guys. There's absolutely no reason he should really be listening to these critics. Maybe he isn't testing himself, but he is doing what he needs to do to win, which is the whole idea. At least he didn't dance around the ring. Mm-hmm. I want to give credit to Dan Hardy, on the other hand, for showing a lot of heart and guts, because he was caught in some bad submission predicaments with the Kimura and the armbar in the first and last round, I believe, and he did not submit. Either time, he got out, he stayed in it. There was that great visual of St-Pierre looking up at the screen while he had that Kimura on, like, what can I do? This guy's not tapping. So credit to Dan Hardy for that, but I think going forward that there was that rumor that's really died down that he was 50-50 on giving up UFC and going for the Olympics, which hasn't been mentioned in a while, so it doesn't look like that's going to happen, especially for this young prospect giving up a title in the prime of his career for this long shot. But he's cleared out the division, I would think, and it would seem that it's been on UFC's mind for the past year and on the fans' minds that we want this dream catchweight match with Anderson Silva. So we will get to him. And moving on, yes?
By the way, I want to mention to the whole crowd that Matt Serra is a former welterweight title champion, and he beat St-Pierre on April 7, 2007.
Thanks so much. It was so dramatic at the end of the first Primetime when, oh my God, it's Matt Serra, and he's going to teach Dan Hardy all his secrets, which I guess the whole secret of getting fucking lucky didn't happen this time. But anyway, moving on to UFC 112 on April 10th in Abu Dhabi. A lot riding on this, a new market, and the government of Abu Dhabi buying 10% of UFC. Obviously, they want to have a good first event, good first impression. I don't think that really happened, and as we move on, so far it hasn't been a very good month, I think, for MMA events, but let's start with the major fights of UFC 112 in the welterweight division. Your man, Jay, Matt Hughes, fighting for the first time in a while against debuting Renzo Gracie, over 40 years old, but still thought he had it, and I don't think he really did. What do you think of that fight?
This is one of the few times that I've been really disappointed with Matt Hughes in finishing off an opponent when he's had him. Matt Hughes could have finished off Renzo Gracie a lot earlier in the fight, much like Anderson Silva, who I'm sure we'll get to. And he just didn't do it. I don't know if it was out of respect or because they're buddies or whatnot, but he just didn't finish him when he could have, and that's always disappointing. He looked pretty good. He looked like he still has a little bit left in the tank. You know, he beat Matt Serra, I think it was last year at some point, and now he beats a Gracie, another Gracie. So we'll see what's next for him. I'm sure he still has a few more fights left in him, so that's going to be interesting to see what they do.
Me and Jay were watching this fight, and I even looked at it. I was like, what the hell are they doing? Because this is not MMA. You're not, I mean, to me, I'm sorry. You are not supposed to be helping the guy up. You know, it almost makes it look like a fake fight. It's like, what if people had money on this? And then people are like, what the hell? He's not even knocking him out. And so, honestly, this is why I don't like Matt Hughes for this reason, because this is ridiculous. That was just stupid. You're supposed to put your opponent away in an MMA fight. I don't care how much respect you have. It goes out the door when you're in that ring. You don't be helping the guy up, let him up. They try to get 15 minutes of their own time. That was like selfishness to me. So, honestly, I didn't like it. I thought it was one of the worst fights in MMA. I'm being totally honest with you, that I've watched. There was nothing about it that made me feel like, ooh, that was great. It wasn't a good fight at all.
I don't think it was a very good fight for Matt Hughes. This guy's, he's a legend, of course, but he's been around for a long time. But it's kind of like in boxing when these guys get to a certain age, and it's like the only fights they have left are these freak show fights, and he finished off a guy barely with barely any time left. He has the Gracie, but for a guy like Matt Hughes to take that long to finish somebody and the fight going the way it was, I don't really think he's got much left.
I really think Matt Hughes could have ended it before he did, but he mentioned after the fight that he was just having fun. I mean, to me, this was the fight that I was...
Speak for himself.
Yeah. I was looking to this fight the most because I thought here's a guy who's looked at as the most dominant Gracie, I guess you should say. I was looking for the old Pride Gracie to go against revenge against what Matt did to Hoist at UFC 60, and instead it looked like, two old chums sparring in the gym after playing golf all day. It really wasn't enticing to watch. And I think after a while, Matt Hughes knew that Renzo Gracie wasn't, giving him any competition, so he didn't really feel threatened. So I think he really didn't, put forth all his power. You could tell that he was, just toying with him at the end. He really could have ended it if he really wanted to, but I think he just chose not to until the time was right.
Well, they certainly did hype it up in the pre-fight time with video packages and whatnot, that it was Renzo going to get revenge for what he did to my relative and blah, blah, blah. And you'd think that someone who had that killer instinct in the past and who finished off Hoist Gracie so quickly years ago, he could have really cemented himself as the American Sakuraba, and by that I mean the Gracie killer, getting yet another Gracie under his belt, but he didn't really go for it. And Renzo I was keeping a particular eye on, and I would certainly not like to use the word sad and pathetic because I respect Renzo Gracie, I respect the Gracie family and everything they've contributed to mixed martial arts, even specifically this show because of Renzo's connections to Abu Dhabi in the past, but this was just pretty sad to watch. He just seems so gassed out so quickly and so old.
He just seemed old, and taking it from I talked to guys who were training him with him for this fight, and they said that he had trained a little bit, but really didn't work a lot in his cardio, and fortunately it showed because after the first round he was pretty much out of the fight.
Well, moving on to the title fights that night. Lightweight title match, BJ Penn and Frankie Edgar. A lot of people did not give Frankie Edgar any chance of winning going into this, and the Toms River, New Jersey native ended up usurping BJ Penn. A lot of people were saying BJ Penn did not look like the usual BJ Penn, his usual self. What's your take on this, Jay?
I was really surprised that BJ Penn didn't adapt his game at all to what Frankie Edgar was doing. Frankie Edgar had a very easy game plan that it looked like. He was just sticking and moving, trying to stay on his toes and move around away from BJ as fast as he could. Exactly, yeah. And BJ Penn should have pinned him up against the cage, charged at him, maybe tried to take him down at some point, but he really wasn't. He kept it on his feet the whole time. I can't tell you how happy I was for my hometown boy, Frankie Edgar, winning, because I'm from Toms River area, and it was a huge deal around here. They even shut down a couple of blocks. He had a huge party in Toms River somewhere where he was just handing out T-shirts and people were posing with the belt and everything. So it was a pretty big deal here by the shore. And I was impressed.
He finally made the cover of the sports section of Asbury Park Press.
Yeah, and that's a pretty big deal. And I was just impressed with Frankie in general, sticking to his game plan, not going away from it, not trying to finish BJ Penn off, because that could have been a bad idea in giving BJ an opening. So we'll see what happens. I heard they're having a rematch, and that should be very interesting.
BJ's been calling for a rematch, and I think Edgar would be up for it, but I believe he has someone else in mind first. But in the stick and move sense, it was almost as if it was a more high-octane version of the previous fight with Hughes and Gracie, where they would go in, exchange just a little bit, and then back off, just much less lethargic. What'd you make of it, Will?
Yeah, again, Frank, winning the belt was a big deal, I think, especially for us around here. It was a good fight. He did a great game plan. You saw how he kept moving his head, moving his body, and he did that all 5 rounds. I mean, how many guys in 5 rounds keep moving their head, keep moving their body like that? Not many can, and he was able to do it. He went for a lot of takedown attempts, and he got 1 out of all of them, which, to many people say it's hard to take PJ Penn down anyway. But he got him down.
I saw his fight with Kenny Florian in August at the Wachovia Center at 101, and the story of that fight was Florian was trying to take him down, and he could not do it. BJ is great on one leg, and I did give BJ the first round of this fight, but not anyone after that, and I believe if there were any doubts in anybody's mind, takedown in the last round really solidified Edgar's scorecard victory.
Yeah, I agree with that. That was what did it. To me, when he took him down, I was like, oh, that's it. There's no way he can lose this fight.
Yeah.
So, and, it was just a little upsetting that some people watched the pay-per-view at 1 p.m. because it was live, and some people were kind of revealing the results. That was kind of like a killer, too, because, I didn't even watch it. I wanted to watch it, and
yeah, luckily we avoided spoilers.
Yeah, I hate spoilers, man. I don't look at any spoiling websites at all.
Not just written spoilers on the internet, but no dicks running around, hey, you know who won this?
Yeah, we had plenty of those at the bar, right, Jay?
Yeah, we did, man. My buddy called me and said, is it true that Frankie Edgar won, bro? At about 5 o'clock. So I almost made it to 10 o'clock.
Cell phones off, Sal.
Yep.
Before this fight, for the first time in a long time, I think, in my opinion, in UFC, we had 5 guys as champion who are pretty dominant, and I was almost thinking, like, it's going to be a long time before we see a title change, and which one of these guys is going to be the first to get beat. And I didn't think it would be
Machida,
BJ.
Maybe.
Yeah, well, I didn't think it would be BJ, but
no.
It's a shame that it was a good fight and it was entertaining, but it's almost kind of a shame that he lost the way he did, because Jay really nailed it. Like, everything that Frankie Edgar did was perfect. Like, he played it right, and BJ just fell right into his trap and didn't adapt, and he lost the fight, I think, almost more than Frankie won it. But I mean, you got to give Frankie credit, because he did everything right to beat BJ and came out on top.
BJ looked at one of those guys who was a champion, looked like he wasn't going to lose the belt for a long time. And here's this, young up-and-comer, Frankie Edgar, who jumps ahead of Gray Maynard to get this title shot, and he was the aggressor. I think in the second round, I knew that, the kid from Toms River was going to come out and he's going to do it. And BJ did a great job. He counter-struck, and he really just he didn't so much look lost, but he didn't, look like himself. It's almost like shots that what was going on that Frankie was able to stand, and he went with him all 5 rounds. And Frankie, this is his first title fight, it's his first time going all 5 rounds. So I think it's great for wrestlers in general. It's good for wrestlers who want to transition to MMA. It shows that it is possible to come out and beat one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world. And
yeah,
Frankie
wrestling
did it.
beat jiu-jitsu that night.
Wrestling beat jiu-jitsu, and he beat him on the feet too. And it just shows that BJ you can't always be defensive. If you really want to win, even if you're the defending champion, you can't counter. You have to start attacking too.
A lesson we would find out a week later at Strikeforce, but we're not getting there quite yet because we have to talk about the now infamous main event for the middleweight title with Anderson Silva and Damian Maia. I don't even know where to begin on this one, so I'm going to throw it to you, Jay.
I was extremely disappointed, and Will knows that. We watched this fight together. It was cute in the beginning when Anderson Silva was doing this, was calling him on and putting his hands behind his back and trying to engage. It started out kind of cute, but then it just got overwhelming, and it was just boring, and he really...
You think he was covering up for being tired?
I don't know, man. I really don't think so, because he could have laid out Damian Maia in the first round. He could have beat him in the first round with no problem if he wanted to. And if he didn't beat him in the first round, he definitely would have beat him in the second round. It just didn't make any sense to me whatsoever. I don't know what the hell he was thinking.
Could have beaten him anytime he wanted to.
Absolutely. It made no sense to me. I don't know what the hell he was thinking. It was very disappointing, and I hope Dana White really reamed him out for it. I really do.
Dana White was twittering like crazy, like, what the fuck is this? That's what he basically was saying. He was so pissed off. I mean, think about it. He never even put the belt around the guy's waist. That's how mad he was. Fight overall, yeah, it was cute in the beginning when he was doing it, and then it got really stupid and silly. Maia even tried to come back. If you listen to the post-fight interview, he was coming back in the fifth round. He was actually getting some punches on him. And then the referee had to stop, Silva for doing what he was doing.
The ref did warn him with only a minute left in the round.
Yeah, I mean, that should have been warned the third round. I mean, it was just ridiculous. I mean, what an embarrassment. Thank God I didn't pay $40. I mean, I only paid $5 just to see it. Imagine people who paid $50, $40 for this fight. How disappointing, for them, and, it's just, what are you going to do? I mean, that's never done. How often does this happen in MMA? It doesn't happen often.
It seems it happens every time Anderson Silva fights at middleweight.
No, I mean, the point is that there's definitely got to be something done about it, and Dana White's post-interview is phenomenal. If anybody hasn't seen it, go see it, because he definitely, he's disappointed, because again, he's in a town that's sponsoring him a lot of money, and do you think, I mean, honestly, does anybody think that is actually going to happen again, and are they going to go back there again?
Well, Abu Dhabi, we were talking about it in the office amongst ourselves. We were wondering if it goes to the ground, if Abu Dhabi is going to be one of those crowds that really reacts to it, kind of the anti-Canada in the way, whereas in Canada, if you stay on the ground, it seems too much, they start to riot. Whereas here, Abu Dhabi, obviously, they love grappling. There's the Abu Dhabi Grappling Championship Tournament and whatnot, but didn't really happen too much because of these three fights, and I don't think any of them delivered. What do you think, Sal?
Well, I was disappointed before the fight even, because this is the third time actually that Anderson Silva was supposed to fight Vitor Belfort, and right. I've been been looking forward to that for a while now, and got robbed of it again due to circumstances beyond their control, I guess. So. But yeah, it's just kind of a weird fight, and Anderson Silva, I think, he's fantastic, and I don't see anybody that can beat him as of right now. But it would be one thing, I think, if this was just a random occurrence. But he kind of had this same type of fight against Patrick Cote, and then
Latis.
Yeah, exactly. So this is like kind of the third time it's happened. Although I think this is the worst of the three, but. Like I think Will said, Dana White, I mean, he walked out before the fight was even over. So this is something that there's going to be long-term effects from, I think. But I don't know what the deal is with Anderson Silva, because he's such a great fighter, and then every once in a while he just has one of these weird fights. Can't figure it out. It's strange. It's
really the opposite side of the coin when he moved up to light heavyweight and fought Forrest Griffin. That's the Anderson Silva that we remember. And that's the Anderson Silva that we're fans of.
Yeah, I don't know if he feels as though that he's just not being challenged, and he's just, completely writing these guys off, and I'm not even going to try because why? Give me somebody that can step up to my level. I don't know if that's the problem or what.
Probably. What do you think, Rod?
I think that this is, without doubt, the fight of the year. I don't think that's going to be that's going to be as funny as this fight was. I remember, we were at Hooters, and I remember saying to you, saying to you, like, I never laughed so much during a fight. But, I think Anderson, if I was GSP, I'd really be taking Anderson Silva because it gets all the heat off him. And, I don't know. It was just really silly. There's a difference between fighting to win, and just running around and just letting the clock run out. There are definitely a lot of times where he could have easily finished Damon Maya. Looks like he had him in the first or second round, but then, towards the end of the fight, Damon Maya was really pushing it, and it was Anderson Silva who was backing away. So Anderson Silva can't say that he wasn't being challenged, because I thought Damon Maya was really trying to come at him. But,
Do you think Maya seemed a little afraid to get in and suffer through a couple strikes to get in on Anderson Silva? The first half of the fight?
Yeah, just look what Anderson Silva did to his face in the first round.
And he barely touched him.
He barely touched him. Right. So I don't know what kind of message Anderson Silva is trying to portray, but hey, he has people talking. If he wants to still be relevant and have people talking, then he did his job.
Well, he certainly did his job of playing the heel, but I think the message is not only clear in his behavioral patterns at this weight class, but also his size. You may remember, Rod, we were noting how huge he looked when he stepped into the cage. It looked like some sort of Ray Harryhausen Cyclops monster compared to Damian Maia. He looked huge. He looked a lot more thick than what we're used to. I think he's got other weight divisions on his mind. I think he's bored at this point. And I was looking up some stuff on James Toney before. I find it particularly curious, and we'll get to this when we tape on Sunday, but part of James Toney's deal that he signed with UFC recently is that he is still allowed to box, which I find very funny considering how long this whole story of boxing Roy Jones Jr. has gone with Anderson Silva, and that's never even entered into possibility with Dana White. Now,
and they both really want to do it, too, apparently. Roy Jones is all about it.
Well, they do, and it just seemed for a long time that Anderson Silva is waiting to somehow get out of UFC so he can pursue this obsession that he has. And he, unfortunately, somehow holds on to the title all the time. Now, I'm a huge Anderson Silva fan. For the first round and a half or so, I was really into it. I loved the way he's inhumanly, like a video game, able to execute some of these maneuvers. That spinning back kick, it looked like one frame to the next in Street Fighter. It was inhuman how fast he was able to pull that off. Didn't contact, but if he had, he certainly would have done a lot of damage. And, of course, the way he's ducking all those punches, as if he's got a sixth sense and he knows when they're coming up. But after that, it just got embarrassing, needless to say. And the discipline that Dana White has handed down, and a lot of people were wondering what that might be, is that if he ever does anything like this again, he's going to be fired on the spot, champion or not. And they're hoping to have him defend the belt against Kyle Shonen. So there goes your Vitor Belfort fight again, Sal. They're targeting August 7th in Salt Lake City at UFC 117 to hopefully get that done. I am a Vitor Belfort fan as well, and I would have loved to have seen that fight, so I'm disappointed we don't get to see that again. But let me throw this out there to you guys. If you were Dana White, what would you do about this? Because this guy is obviously talented, super good fighter when he wants to be, and therefore you shouldn't even have to think about putting a dominant, talented champion in your main event, but he's killing his own drawing power by doing so, and especially 3 times in a row at this weight class. What would you do with Anderson Silva's next fight? Would you main event this pay-per-view in Salt Lake City with it?
I don't know. I think I'd put him on as a co-main event maybe. I really think Dana White's doing the right thing by giving him one more chance to go out there with Chael Sonnen and put on a real fight. And Chael Sonnen's good. Chael Sonnen, if he puts his face out there to Chael Sonnen and puts his hands behind his back like that, Sonnen's going to knock his head off. No question about it. So I think that Dana White's doing the right thing, and I would probably do that too. Give him one more chance. If he does it again, and if he really wants out of the UFC, then he'll be out of the UFC. It's as simple as that.
That's how you put Lesnar and him together and make the best heel tag team in UFC history. I'm just kidding. But, yeah, give him another shot. I don't think this is going to, I think he definitely deserves another, shot. If he does it again, definitely get rid of him. It's not needed, to have showboating. It makes the belt look bad. It makes the division look bad because he's the man representing the entire division.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, and like Dana White now said, one more fight like this and he's fired on the spot. I mean, he's bound to that now. You can't go back on that after you say it publicly. I think really they have to sit down with the agent and just try to talk things through and try to stay calm and just really try to figure out where his head's at and make sure it doesn't happen again.
I don't know what got into me. Rodney?
I feel like, with Chael Sonnen, I feel like Vince McMahon putting a hit out on Steve Austin for his behavior for that. What I would do with Anderson Silva, you can't let a guy, because he's going to, someone else is going to scoop him up right away, and no matter who he fights, it's going to draw ratings. Even if he went to Strikeforce and fought Henderson again, it'll draw ratings. So you don't get rid of a fighter like that. I mean, me personally, I would put him against light heavyweight because he feels that they want money fights. His management has always said they want the bigger fights. That's why he's even willing to drop down to 170 to go against GSP. So that just shows like what he's willing to put himself through in order, to really cement his legacy as the best pound-for-pound fighter. He wants to fight the best. That's why he wants to fight Roy Jones Jr. He doesn't want to fight, some up-and-comer boxer who's only had one professional fight. He wants to fight the best, the biggest names. And, that's what I would do because once you back him up against the corner, you put him in light heavyweight, those guys, they're going to feel, hey, here's this middleweight coming up to my division. I'm defending my division. I'm not going to let him, embarrass me. And then that's where, you'll see the best of Anderson Silva.
Well, Dana White said that he's got no interest in seeing GSP Anderson Silva now because he's so pissed, even though the fans were chanting for GSP in the latter half of that fight. He also said he might be the first champion to defend his belt on the prelim. And from a marketing perspective, I could see both sides of that argument because on one hand, that is definitely punishment for a champion to not even be on the main show. It sucks for the legitimacy of the title, so to speak, but what else can you do with Anderson Silva if there was no guarantee? Now, of course, he has said if you don't perform up to the level we know you're capable of, you're going to be fired, so probably won't happen this time. I would have preferred to have seen the Vitor Belfort fight finally to really guarantee that, but everyone seems to agree that Shonen's going to take it to Anderson Silva. He's been talking a lot of trash and saying he's so pissed off and not going to put up with that stuff, so we'll see what they do in Salt Lake City if that is indeed where that fight takes place. But moving on to this past Saturday Night Fights presented by CBS, Strikeforce in Nashville. And I think the streak of bad shows for April is continued. Hopefully this coming Saturday, WEC can end that. That's a card I'm really looking forward to. We'll probably be talking about that next week right here on Blog Talk Radio. But right now it's Strikeforce. And the first fight we saw was for their light heavyweight title with Gegard Mousasi. Gegard. No one knows how to pronounce that name, really, do they?
I think it's King.
Versus King Mo. First fight of the night. I'm a fan of King Mo, but I wasn't too totally blown away by this. Much like BJ Penn, it seemed like Mousasi was pretty disinterested in his own title fight. What did you think of this fight, Sal?
I kind of agree with that, and just like the Anderson Silva fight, it kind of went the same way. Unanimous decision. He won every round. Didn't he get warned for something at some point?
Yeah. What happened was King Mo was on his knees. He was starting to stand up, and Mousasi went for a up kick, and he hit him while he was down technically. Okay. And McCarthy took a point away.
Gotcha. But yeah, I don't know if
did not help his standing in that fight.
Yeah, I don't know if Cavalier is the right word for it, but just kind of like the same feel. I would agree with that, Eric.
I liked watching King Mo. This is the first time I saw King Mo fight, and I've heard the hype about him, and he's been issuing challenges to Rampage and whatnot. And I thought he won 4 out of the 5 rounds. I gave Masashi the second round because of the up kicks, and just King Mo started to get gassed. But he, like Frank Yeager, stuck to a game plan. He just kept using his wrestling, and he was definitely stronger, and he just kept taking them down. He was taking shots when Gayhard was on his back. He was taking some shots, but it didn't hurt him enough. And Mo just kept going. He just kept taking them down over and over again and scoring points. And he did enough, 5-round decision. He definitely did enough to win the fight.
Chris Harris joins the Wrestling Roundtable. Hello, Chris.
Hello. Happy 420, everyone.
Hey, Chris Harris.
Woohoo, what's going on?
He's only 53 minutes late.
Yeah, I got stuck at work late tonight.
So we were just talking about the Strikeforce light heavyweight title fight with Gegard Mousasi and King Mo. What did you think, Chris?
Oh, King Mo just killed him. That guy looked like he didn't come to fight at all.
King Mo looked like he was pretty exhausted by the end of that fight, though.
Yeah, he needs to work on some cardio now that he's a champ. He's got to go 5 rounds.
He definitely took him down real well, much like GSP almost at will.
Yeah, definitely.
First of all, I'm surprised that this fight opened the card. This is one of the fights I was really interested to say the least. And I thought this was King Mo's first big real test. I mean, he's faced, Mark Kerr, who's way past his prime, and Mike Whitehead, who was not a really legitimate threat.
He also finished him rather quickly.
Yeah. And Mousasi was looked at as one of these great up-and-comers who's even making pound-for-pound lists. So, to say the least, I thought that Mousasi was going to win. I thought he was going to beat him within the second round, TKO. But, even the commentators were saying that Mousasi's plan was he was going to wait for King Mo to tire himself out, and then once he gets in the championship round, that he was really going to let loose. And we never saw that. And I think Mousasi really didn't do a good job of defending the takedowns. And you don't have to be a genius. You can watch 1 minute of a King Mo fight to know what his game plan is. He's going to take you down. He's going to ground and pound you. And I think that if Strikeforce allowed elbows, I think King Mo could have finished the fight if he wanted to. Mousasi looked tired, has his hands down towards the 4th and 5th rounds. He really just seemed out of place. He looked pretty lost. And, people criticized King Mo. Yeah, he was tired. He was out of breath. But guess what? The guy still went out there. He still went 5 rounds. And he still took, this guy who was 22-2 when King Mo was on his 7th fight, and he kept taking him down at will and pounding him out. And you can't blame King Mo for Mousasi not coming up with a great game plan.
Not just that. I'm not saying that he wasn't trying, because even though he was clearly tired, he was still going at it. He was still trying to take down Mousasi, and he was still going forward.
He had one eye.
Mm-hmm. With whatever he could muster, he was still going forward. So credit to King Mo for that, especially for winning a major title like that, only 7 professional fights into his career. And a lot of people were complaining, I read after the fact, about time management. Strikeforce and CBS, they don't know how to run a show. It went way too long because it was, at least on my cable listing, listed to go only 9 to 11 as of the day before. And, of course, it went to almost midnight, I believe, or at least past 11:30. Well, that's what happens. You had 3 title fights scheduled for 5 5-minute rounds, and all 3 of them went the distance. The second one was the lightweight title bout between Gilbert Melendez and the Dream lightweight champion, that belt was not on the line, against Shinya Aoki. And they did a pretty good job of hyping up Shinya Aoki for people who haven't seen him. Especially that's a good thing to do when you're broadcasting on non-cable television. Here in America, people are really not going to know who he is outside the diehards. And yet again, people were expecting a lot out of Shinya Aoki, and it seemed to be the theme throughout these past few shows that these guys with these reputations didn't really live up to it. And Melendez, on the grand stage, I think really impressed with his ferocity and his intensity and his striking. And I think he kind of established himself here, but I don't know if I'd go so far as to say number 2 in the world, or he thinks he should be ranked up there with BJ Penn at least. What do you make of this, Jay?
Melendez looked really good. This was also the first time I saw him fight and the first time I saw Aoki fight. But Melendez looked great. I wouldn't say he's a world-class fighter just yet. I really would have liked to see him finish Aoki off because at this point the show just started to get a little bit boring because it was, I didn't like the way Strikeforce booked the show, so to speak, to put 3 title fights on. And how you don't put Mayhem Miller on the card is another story because everybody knows him from MTV and whatnot. But anyway, back to Melendez. He looked good. And he was impressive. I don't think he's world-class, but we'll have to see a little more from him.
I was definitely impressed by Melendez. I had never seen either one of these guys before this fight. I've never even heard of Melendez, but Aoki I've heard a ton of stuff on, a ton of hype, and it just didn't live up to it for me. I really did expect more from him, from all the hype I've heard. Dream Champion. He's only been around for about 6 or 7 years, and he's already got 29 fights, and he finishes people by submission, and he didn't really impress me that much, and Melendez really shined through. Like you said, maybe not top 2 or 3 in the world, but definitely made a case for himself, and a couple more fights like that, and people will definitely be talking about.
I agree with Sal. This guy, he definitely didn't live up to the hype, but the one thing that really bothered me was after the fight when they were talking about, if you think you're number 1, and this guy basically says, I'm like 2 or 3. That would be like, AJ Styles in TNA. They ask him, are you number 1 champion in the world? Oh, I guess I'm behind Jack Swagger and John Cena. When you're the number 2 company trying to play catch-up, you can't be modest.
Well, to touch on that, you can't be biased, but you have to be honest. You have to be, real, because who honestly is going to, if he went out and said he's number 1 lightweight, who honestly is going to take him seriously? There would have been an uproar, and I think that would have just, made him look ridiculous.
At least you have people talking about him, though.
Yeah, of course, but, then again, you really have to beat number 1, you have to beat number 1, and everyone knows number 1 is BJ Penn. So, but other than that...
UFC don't co-promote, wah!
But I think Shinya Aoki didn't represent Japanese MMA like he said he was going to do.
Do they ever? I mean, really, every time a Japanese fighter, and no disrespect to every single Japanese fighter ever, but doesn't it seem as if every time that they're in a non-pride worked fight that they end up coming up short?
See the Kenny Florian fight. Anyways. Yeah, I think Kenny Florian proved that point as well. But you have to give Gilbert Melendez a lot of credit because he did what he could. I mean, Aoki wouldn't stand up with him. I think Melendez was, smart enough to not stand the ground with him because, with a guy that dangerous, the guy who finished off Eddie Alvarez, who's looked at as one of the top 5 lightweights in the world, the Bellator Fight Championship, he got submitted by Aoki. So, you really have to, keep all that in mind. And I think, again, if there were elbows allowed in Strikeforce, I think this fight would have been a lot different. But there's not, so there's not a lot you could do. But you have to give Melendez credit. He did beat the Dream lightweight champion, and they have a lot of good lightweights in there. So I would definitely put him up there as number 2 or 3.
Do you think Aoki just wanted it to be on the mat and nothing else? Like he wouldn't even try if it wasn't able to use his jiu-jitsu?
I think that he knew Melendez's striking power. I really don't think he wanted any part of stand-up, to be honest. It didn't look like it, at least.
Kind of the opposite of Anderson Silva the week before, where he wouldn't go to the ground with Damian Maia.
Exactly. I think he's been training with Talos Leites a little too much before this fight.
All right. Well, moving on to the main event for the middleweight title. Jake Shields defending against Dan Henderson. Dan Henderson was pretty much the guy that Strikeforce was riding on to carry this fight, just coming off UFC. Well, maybe not just coming off because it was in July with that big knockout victory on Michael Bisping. So Henderson seemed pretty lethargic outside of the first round where he blew his wad, it seems, and he came real close to finishing Jake Shields with that great roundhouse right, knocked him down, but he couldn't put him away, and I think he didn't have anything really left in the gas tank after that. People were, again, saying he didn't seem like the old Dan Henderson, the old Hendo, and what do you make of this, Jay?
The story was Jake Shields for sure, man. He really showed us something with his ground game and just dominating Dan Henderson. I think Dan Henderson had the knowledge in his head that he was going to knock him down and knock him out in the first round, and that's what he prepared to do, and he wasn't ready to defend on the ground, man, because he didn't defend at all. He didn't do anything to Jake Shields on the ground, man. Jake Shields was dominated him, and
Jake Shields didn't do anything to finish him either, Strike.
No, he didn't, but he could have. There could have been a stoppage. Depending on who the referee was, there could have been a stoppage because he was hitting him with.
Was coming close a few times.
Yeah, absolutely. The sad thing about it, though, is after the 5th round ended, I flipped over to HBO Boxing and watched Kelly Pavlik fight, and I missed all the shenanigans that took place afterwards. But I'm sure we're going to get to that. So.
Yes, we will.
We've not seen the same Dan Henderson that we of old. He had a good big role a couple years ago where he beat who's who, all top names. And then, ever since he came back to UFC, he was 3-2, a couple tough fights. He made mincemeat out of Michael Bisping, shut his big mouth. That's the last time we saw him. And then, just came out, didn't really look like he was prepared. And, he couldn't get the job done. To me, the post-fight annex were the most entertaining part of it.
You think Dana White seems to be in the right here in terms of the whole dispute about how much Henderson was actually worth paying?
It looks like it at this point, and it also to me kind of exposes Bisping even more because I've really never liked him, and now it just kind of shows that he's not a top level talent even more so than we saw last year.
Yeah, I think it's time for Henderson really he's getting up there. This might be the end for him. It was a nice punch that he got on Bisping. That was a pretty quick fight, but 5 rounds, that was pretty brutal.
This was not the old Dan Henderson. I think it's the same Dan Henderson that we've seen, and that's the problem. I think simply he just got outclassed by a better grappler. He was just really intense on knocking him out. I mean, here's the guy who, is set to the legitimate UFC fighter to help bring Strikeforce to where they want. And, it's almost like the situation where UFC would bring in pride guys like Krokop and Shogun, how, Krokop's, second performance, how he got knocked out, and Shogun getting beat by Forrest Griffin. And simply put, Jake Shields, black belt jiu-jitsu, out-wrestled an Olympic-level wrestler, and Dan Henderson had no answer for it. And in his past fights, he's really been out-wrestled by a lot of his opponents. He was out-wrestled by Ninja Rua. Even if, if Michael Bisping had better wrestling, who would knows? But Dan Henderson has been on his back before and just hasn't done much. And, Jake Shields, after the first round, was smart enough to know where Henderson's weakness was.
Much like UFC 112 a week before, a lot of the talk after the event was what happened after the main event, and not particularly the main event itself. In this case, it wasn't Anderson Silva's punishment. It was Jason Mayhem Miller coming into the cage, interrupting Jake Shields. And by the way, wasn't it nice that Willie Nelson was in Jake Shields' corner for this fight? Or was it just me who thought that guy looked like Willie Nelson?
I thought that was great.
So, of course, this big brawl happens on CBS, and Dana White is rightfully upset about this because we're trying to get into New York, we're trying to get in Toronto, and people see this shit and think it's UFC, and we're not doing that stuff, and it's giving the whole sport a bad name, and that seemed to be the sentiment echoed by the announcers, who, by the way, I do like Mauro Ranallo, I like Frank Shamrock, I like the non-UFC commentary teams, even when Ranallo was with Bas Rutten. So that is at least something I enjoy from this show. And the production wasn't bad either. The fights left something to be desired, but again, people were talking about this big brawl that happened on CBS, and there's supposed to be an investigation by the Tennessee Athletic Commission. I don't know about you guys, but maybe this is my paranoid wrestling sensibilities, but I thought it was a work immediately. Did anybody else feel that?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Elaborate.
Oh, without a doubt. You have Mayhem Miller. The guy is known from MTV. Anybody who listens to the Jason Ellis show will know who he is. He's a personality, and it's really a way to get people talking. It was a disaster of a show, really, with all none of the really exciting fights. And Dana White, what does it matter? Oh, we're trying to get UFC taken seriously. How many times do you see the benches clear out in baseball? It happens all the time. Every sport this happens in.
Well, they're under the microscope more than those established sports. Does anybody else feel this way?
I agree with Chris 100%, actually. I was going to bring up the baseball analogy, too. That's a perfect way to put it. I didn't see what happened, but I heard about it, and I initially thought it was a work as well when I heard about it.
Nice microphone, Mr. Anderson.
It's hard to say. You know how, just like you, Eric, I've worked in wrestling, reality TV. I don't believe anything's real anymore. But this guy, Jason Miller, has...
Well, we've seen it with our own eyes, you and I.
Exactly. But, this guy is legit nuts. He's done time, so who knows? Who the hell knows with this guy? But it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility that they said, well, let's send you in there, and just because you're nuts, people will believe it. So who knows? But, it's gotten people talking, and if they do the rematch, then, they can certainly use this stuff for their video packages and play it up.
I don't think it will work, because if they were going to do something like this, it would have been done on Showtime. But to do this on CBS...
Why? That's cable. This is network TV, man.
Exactly, but they want to present MMA, I guess, as safely as possible. They want to get away from this stereotype that MMAs are all these just, a bunch of brawlers that are getting trained to fight. And
that idea hits, I believe.
Yeah, and with the Diaz brothers in there and Melendez and all the guys in there and the way that Mayhem Miller is, I watched it a few times and there were a lot of real hits, and just with the camera angles and the cuts, I don't know, there's no way it was to work. But honestly, to go with what Chris said, it happens like this all the time. You watch a fucking football game. It happens in almost every football game. It happened, I think, the same night, actually, in the Boston game, the Celtics game. It happened in basketball. It happens in baseball a lot. And still, it never gets reprimanded. No one ever questions the future of the sport, both MMA, because it's still floating on thin ice. Every little move is questioned, which I think if, the sport needs to grow, the sport needs to get past that stage.
Funny you mentioned the camera angles and whatnot, because that's what tipped me off to thinking it was a work, and I'll tell you why. First of all, if it really was a legit brawl, which it looks like it probably was, but I thought it was suspicious how Miller got in the cage with no resistance, and it just seemed kind of awkward at the beginning. But then again, you're in the heat of the moment. You may not know exactly what's going on. Your mind's somewhere else, so I'll forgive them that. But when they came back from the commercial and then they replayed it, that's what made me start thinking, why would they replay that? And is it a coincidence that they happened to show Mayhem Miller's highlights from his prelim fight also on this show that didn't really have an A-star like a Fedor to carry it? They didn't really have a Lashley or a Herschel Walker, sort of a mainstream name, certainly not Gina Carano anymore. And they were probably trying to cause some buzz or stir up some stuff. But then I think at the end of the day, you're right, that if that was the case, I don't think they would want to stain MMA's name, so to speak, because now people are saying it didn't do a good number. People are thinking it's going to be done on CBS after this. Who knows? But I think we're done.
Just real quick, was there any reason that Strikeforce gave for not? They blew everything on that Showtime show with Herschel Walker and Lashley and Cyborg and everybody. Did they give any reason for that? Why they would put all that on Showtime and then CBS gets nothing?
Well,
maybe they thought Dan Henderson was enough, and it's funny that the UFC 110 still beat Strikeforce in the 18 to 34 male group.
Yeah, Dana White said that. He thought Dan Henderson was going to outdraw Fedor, which I guess that's proven to be false.
Yeah, I think bringing up the name Fedor is the wrench that was thrown in their plans. Or actually, I shouldn't even say Fedor, M1, because M1 is renegotiating his contract now after the Brett Rogers fight, and the number that Fedor drew with Brett Rogers is about 48% higher, I think I read, than the number they did for this one. So maybe Fedor is a little more of a draw than we thought. But that's going to wrap it up for Wrestling Roundtable this week. Next week, 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time here at blogtalkradio.com. We'll be talking about the WEC pay-per-view coming up this Saturday. I think we'll probably get around to NXT, as that's something we've also been meaning to talk about. And again, all the latest goings-on in pro wrestling and MMA. We'll be taping new episodes of Wrestling Roundtable this Sunday. The first one that will be uploaded sometime next week will be covering the suicide death of Canyon, looking back on his career and also relating it to homosexuals in wrestling and the stereotypes that go along with that. And speaking of homosexuals, reflecting on the career of Shawn Michaels as well. Don't forget to join us on WrestlingRoundtable.com. You can get all the links to our MySpace, Facebook, Twitter, iTunes, Go Fight Live editions, and of course there's columns, chat room, tons of content for you at WrestlingRoundtable.com. So for Will Vafides, Jay Oleto, Sal Randazzo, Chris Harris, Rodney LeConte, I'm Eric Santamaria. Thank you, and join us next week live.